The neighborhood was a portrait of suburban tranquility, each house standing in disciplined rows like soldiers at attention. The air was a soft whisper of spring, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the undertone of blooming daisies. It was the sort of place where daily life unfolded with a predictable rhythm, where the most notable intrusions might be the distant bark of a dog or the occasional rumble of a distant lawnmower. Our homes were nestled in a cul-de-sac, the kind that promised isolation, yet enforced community. It seemed the world outside had forgotten us, leaving us to our own quiet devices, guarded by the watchful eyes of the homeowners association. In this microcosm, however, one resident stood out. Karen. She was the self-appointed sovereign of our little kingdom, patrolling her dominion with the zeal of a medieval tax collector. Her domain extended beyond her primly manicured yard, reaching its tendrils into the affairs of every neighbor. Her crusade for order and compliance was relentless, her interpretations of the HOA rules as rigid as the marble statues dotting her garden. I was a man of quiet habits, content with the slow pace of life behind my white picket fence. My mornings were marked by the gentle ritual of brewing coffee, the steam swirling up like an offering to the gods of routine. I relished the peace, the absence of drama, until the day Karen decided to expand her empire. Her ATV was a beastly thing, more suited to conquering rugged wilderness than the narrow strip of land that separated our properties. The first time I saw her cutting through, I watched with mild disbelief. Tires tore at the earth, leaving behind a scar of churned soil and crushed grass. Her face was a mask of determination, as if the very act of traversing my land was a noble crusade. Perhaps it was an oversight, a momentary lapse in navigating the labyrinthine paths of suburbia. I returned to my coffee, watching the steam dissipate, the tranquility returning like an old friend. Then it happened again, and again. Each time, her intrusion was marked by the roar of the engine and the silent protest of my once pristine lawn. I tried to approach it with the calm of a seasoned diplomat. The logical part of me told stories of misunderstandings resolved with a gentle word or a neighborly chat over the hedgerow. Yet, I knew that words would be wasted. Karen was a creature of habit, her actions justified by some unwritten decree woven into her perception of neighborhood law. I decided on a different approach, a subtle reminder of boundaries, a simple row of stones, artfully arranged, that traced the line between hers and mine. They were unsophisticated soldiers, standing guard quietly at the edge of my world. I placed them with care, each stone a silent testament to patience. The response was immediate. Her ATV came to a halt, a beast thwarted by the simplicity of stone. Our eyes met for a brief moment, her face a canvas of bewilderment and disbelief. Her reign of intrusion had met an unexpected end. There were no words exchanged. None were needed. The stones spoke for themselves, a testament to resilience in the face of uninvited chaos. As she turned her vehicle around, the tension in the air crackled like static, a prelude to a storm not yet unleashed. I watched her retreat, the rumble of the ATV fading into the distance, leaving behind an uneasy silence. The story was far from over, but for now, the peace returned. A fragile truce held in place by the weight of simple stones and the promise of rebellion yet to come. The sun hung lower in the sky, casting long shadows on the gravel paths that threaded through our once peaceful neighborhood. That peace had become a fragile thing, like old porcelain, ever since Karen had taken it upon herself to personalize the bylaws the way an artist might dabble with a new canvas. I could sense the storm coming when a stiff envelope appeared in my mailbox. Its presence was strangely ominous, like a harbinger of chaos wrapped in HOA stationery. Inside, a list of new regulations glared at me, dripping with absurdity. Noise restrictions, so strict. The crickets would be fined. Grass blades measured with the precision of a jeweler's loop. A decree against unsanctioned gatherings, lest we plot insurrections over lemonade. Karen's signature graced the bottom, looping proudly like a victorious flag. She had taken her annoyance and spun it into a tapestry of petty control. Wielding the HOA as her personal gavel, I imagined her scribbling these rules in the dark hours of morning. Vengeance, fueling each stroke of the pen. Each regulation was punctuated by her relentless gossip, whispers that inflated like balloons in the neighborhood air. They floated, carrying tales of my alleged infractions, each more exaggerated than the last. I'd become a specter of discord, the villainous homeowner who dared defy her rule. I could almost hear her voice, saccharine and sharp, weaving tales over fence lines like a maestro orchestrating a symphony of slander. Mornings brought the inevitable citations. They fluttered onto my doorstep like confetti after a parade, each declaring my transgressions with all the solemnity of a town crier. I collected them, stacking them in a neat pile on my kitchen counter, monuments to absurdity. The whispers grew louder. The neighbors, once friendly nods and casual greetings, now offered tight-lipped smiles, their eyes darting away as if I bore some contagious scandal. It was as if I carried a scarlet letter, invisible but potent, embroidered by Karen's tireless hand. Amidst the chaos, I found unexpected serenity in my garden, a patch of earth that resisted Karen's reach. Here, her decrees seemed to lose their potency, overshadowed by the hum of bees and the gentle rustle of leaves. The garden became my refuge, a silent rebellion against her tyranny. It wasn't long before Karen arrived at my gate, a tempest wrapped in pastel, her ATV idle behind her like a loyal steed. Her eyes were aflame with righteousness, her voice a carefully modulated calm that belied the storm within. You think you can ignore the rules?" she asked, her words sharp enough to slice through the tranquility I had nurtured. In that moment, I realized her power was an illusion, a shadow, cast by fear and control. A smile crept to my lips, slow and deliberate. The garden stood as my testament, a silent witness to her unraveling. I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, a crack in her porcelain facade. Karen's empire, built on control and whispers, was crumbling, and I, the quiet defier, stood amidst the ruins with a peace she could never touch. The morning was cool and quiet, the air carrying the crisp scent of autumn leaves. The tumultuous echoes of Karen's ATV had faded into the background, leaving a serene silence in their wake. Her path was etched deep into the damp earth, a stark reminder of her boundary-defying antics. Each muddy track was a testament to her relentless entitlement, a brazen signature scrawled across my land. I sat by the window, a steaming cup of coffee warming my hands. The golden rays of dawn filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the floor. I watched the light dance, a quiet contrast to the chaos Karen had stirred. My phone buzzed softly on the table, a vibration that seemed in harmony with the morning's stillness. It was a reminder of the evidence I had collected: photos, videos, logs of every intrusion. Technology, I mused, was a double-edged sword. It offered both the sword and the shield in this suburban standoff. Her reckless invasions had not gone unnoticed. Each digital record was a piece of a puzzle, forming a picture of her audacity and disregard. Yet, it was not just about documentation. It was about quiet preparation, a prelude to the storm I would unleash, not with thunderous fury, but with the precision of a well-aimed lightning strike. I turned my attention to the file on my desk. It was thick, a tangible weight of proof and patience. Every page was a step closer to reclaiming my peace. I envisioned Karen's reaction, the storm of indignation that would follow. Her world operated on unspoken rules of entitlement. Rules, she presumed, were universal. The irony of her impending meltdown would be delicious. It was time. I slipped on my jacket, feeling the comforting heft of resolve in each movement. The walk to the HOA office was brisk, each step a drumbeat echoing in the folds of anticipation. I had no illusions of immediate victory. Bureaucracy was a dance of patience, but my feet were well practiced. Karen's transgressions were about to meet their match in quiet tenacity. The office was quiet, a sanctuary of order amid suburban chaos. I handed over the file, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. The manager's eyes widened slightly as he thumbed through the documents. I imagined Karen's face, flushed with fury. The moment she realized her reign of casual invasions was over, it was a small, delicious irony that her undoing lay not in confrontation, but in calm, calculated action. Exiting the office, the chill of the air braced my skin, invigorating. A reminder of the clarity that comes with winter's approach. The path home felt lighter, each step a whisper of change. The anticipation of her reaction was a distant echo, a future storm I would weather with an umbrella of certainty. Back home, I surveyed the tracks one last time, running my fingers through the cool earth. Soon, it would be the past, a memory etched in the annals of neighborhood lore. I imagined the grass growing back, covering her path with nature's soft erasure, a testament to quiet resilience. As I stood there, a gentle wind stirred the leaves, whispering promises of peace. I smiled, a quiet victory claimed. The horizon, clear. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted at autumn just around the corner. A thin veil of mist hung over the neighborhood like a prelude to some unspoken tension. It had been 2 weeks since I laid the barrier. A simple chain-link fence. Nothing too ostentatious, just enough to declare sovereignty over my piece of earth. Karen had been silent, a lull in the storm that made me uneasy. Neighbors had begun to notice, their whispers weaving through the cul-de-sac like a quiet symphony of discontent. Suburbia had its own way of communicating, a language of sidelong glances and hushed tones. People spoke with their eyes, their nods, and sometimes their silence. I felt it when I walked my dog in the evenings, their gazes heavy with curiosity, suspicion, or perhaps a grudging respect. The fence had caused a ripple in the fabric of their routines. The HOA, with its syrupy sweet newsletters and perfectly manicured intentions, had yet to make an official statement, but the silence was telling. It was the kind of quiet that suggested plotting behind closed doors and carefully measured responses. I wondered how long they would let this play out before stepping in. Karen, with her ATV and her audacious spirit, had been a fixture in the neighborhood. Her absence was an echo that bounced off each house, a reminder of the small rebellion that now lay between us. She had retreated, but not vanished. Her silence was more oppressive than her presence had ever been. On mornings, when the sun sliced through the mist, I would see her from my window, standing at the edge of her property, studying the fence like a puzzle she couldn't solve. Her face was a canvas of restrained fury and disbelief, a simmering pot waiting to boil over. It was almost a ritual now, her daily contemplation of the barrier that defied her imperious will. Internally, I rode a wave of conflicting emotions, satisfaction mingled with a twinge of guilt, creating a cocktail of bittersweet victory. The fence was a simple solution to a complex problem. Karen was, after all, just another person trying to navigate the rules of our little world, albeit with a tendency to bulldoze through them. But her actions had forced my hand, and now the balance had shifted. The other residents weren't blind. They saw the change, felt the shift in the hierarchy of our small community. I became an inadvertent symbol of resistance, an unlikely hero in the mundane saga of suburban politics. The irony was not lost on me. I had never sought the spotlight. But here I was, a beacon in the fog of HOA regulations and neighborly feuds. I wondered if the fence had become more than just a physical barrier. It was a statement, a testament to the boundaries we all need to define our lives. It marked not just my property, but a line in the sand for ownership of our autonomy. Karen's silence was its own form of acknowledgement, a reluctant nod to the power of quiet defiance. And so, we waited. The neighborhood held its breath, poised for either resolution or escalation. As I watched the sunset behind the fence, casting a long shadow across the grass, I knew this was only the beginning, the calm before the inevitable storm. The morning sun cast long fingers of light across the lawn, painting it with a deceptive calmness. It was the kind of morning that whispered of serenity, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. But beneath this tranquil facade, a storm brewed, unseen and relentless, driven by the tires of an ATV and the indignant fury of a woman who believed herself untouchable. Karen had long been a nuisance, her entitlement sprawling as expansively as her ATV tires. She carved through my property with a brazen nonchalance, an invader in plain sight. The ruts left behind were scars on the earth, reminders of her perpetual encroachment. But the HOA meetings, her dismissive laughter, all those sharp glares, they had driven me to this decisive moment. As the leaves rustled softly, almost conspiratorially, I stood by the edges of the property line, holding the letters like a talisman. Cease and desist, a phrase that tasted like justice. It had taken weeks, countless calls with lawyers, but I was resolute. I had seen too many bullies in my life. I would not be cowed by one more. The lawyer had assured me the letter was ironclad. Trespassing laws, property rights. Her defiance was her downfall. I imagined her face when she received the official-looking envelope, how the outrage would twist her features, how the paper would crinkle in her grip. A bitter smile played on my lips. Actions have consequences. Karen. The mailbox, usually a mundane object, seemed to glow with significance, a modern-day Trojan horse, carrying words that would pierce her armor of entitlement. I slipped the letter inside and closed the lid with a satisfying clang. It reverberated in the quiet morning, the sound lingering like a promise. I returned to my porch, a silent sentry watching over a domain newly fortified. The air felt different now, charged with purpose. I imagined Karen's reaction as she saw the letter, a shift in the air, the first crack in her kingdom of bluster. The day unfolded slowly, autumn's colors vibrant against the sky. But my mind was a quiet storm. I wondered about justice, the kind that doesn't shout but whispers, weaving its way into the fabric of everyday life until one day it stands undeniable. My thoughts drifted to the past, to times when I had watched injustice pass unchecked. How often had I bitten my tongue, allowed the world to turn without intervention? Not today. Today, I had drawn a line in the sand, one she would not cross unscathed. Hours passed like slow-moving shadows. With each tick of the clock, my anticipation grew, a living thing coiling in my chest. The simple act of sending a letter, a mundane task elevated to a battle cry. When the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, I felt the weight of what I had set in motion. It was a quiet revolution, unseen by many, but its impact would resonate far beyond the confines of my property. As night wrapped its velvet cloak around the neighborhood, I settled into my chair, the world a soft murmur. The stars blinked into existence, indifferent to earthly matters. Yet here I sat, a single person standing firm against another's overreach. Tomorrow would bring its own drama, its own confrontation. But for now, the world was silent, the quiet before the inevitable storm. A part of me relished it, the calm certainty of having taken a stand. And as I sat there, bathed in the cool night air, I knew that in the subtle act of defiance, I had found my own peace. The days after the lockout were quiet, a silence that settled like dust after a raucous storm. The path that Karen once carved through my property was no longer a scar but a memory, quickly fading under new growth and resilience. The grass, now free to reclaim its rightful place, whispered softly in the morning breeze, as if thanking me for the reprieve. Karen had kept her distance, perhaps nursing her grievances in the confines of her perfectly manicured lawn. The HOA meetings carried on, a peculiar peace presiding over our gatherings. The absence of her pointed glances and haughty interruptions was a balm, soothing the frayed edges of a community long held at her mercy. It was at one of these meetings, under the fluorescent hum of the community hall, where the final unraveling began. The agenda was routine budgets, maintenance, the annual summer fair, but there was a tension in the air, a collective anticipation of the inevitable. Karen sat at the end of the table, her usual seat, but there was something different about her. A quiet resignation, perhaps, or simply exhaustion from her self-imposed exile. The president, a rather unassuming fellow with a penchant for plaid ties, cleared his throat. His voice, usually timid, carried an unusual weight. Without preamble, the topic of Karen's behavior was broached. It was time. He said, "For change." The words were simple, but they hung in the air, heavy with the promise of transformation. Karen's eyes flickered, a momentary spark of defiance. But it was quickly extinguished. She remained silent. An unfamiliar role for her, the silence extended. A living thing among us, urging someone to speak, to break the spell, but no one did. Instead, the room filled with the quiet rustle of papers, the shuffling of feet, a gentle symphony of agreement. This was not a coup, nor was it a rebellion. It was a quiet revolution, a collective decision to reclaim our neighborhood from the tyranny of her whims. The motion was passed without her protest, a decisive shift in the balance, and with that, the community began to breathe again. Each inhale a little deeper, a little freer. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, a serene canvas that reflected our newfound peace. Karen lingered near the door, her figure silhouetted against the warm glow. There was no confrontation, no grand farewell, just a quiet acceptance, a nod to the inevitability of change. As the meeting adjourned, I walked past her, our eyes briefly meeting. There was a moment of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of battles fought and lost. Her reign had ended, not with a dramatic clash, but with the quiet persistence of a community unwilling to be divided. The path on my property remained closed, the gate steadfast and unyielding. It was a symbol, a testament to boundaries respected and order restored. The neighborhood, once fractured, began to heal, each interaction a stitch in the tapestry of our shared lives. Karen's ATV, once a symbol of her dominance, sat idle in her driveway, gathering dust and leaves. The community, now free of its roar, embraced the quiet, a harmonious chorus of laughter, conversation, and the gentle rustling of leaves. In the end, it wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about reclaiming our space, our peace, and the right to live without fear of intrusion. The garden bloomed with renewed vigor, each petal a testament to resilience, each leaf a promise of growth. As the days turned into weeks, Karen's presence faded, her role in our lives reduced to a cautionary tale. The community thrived, united by the shared experience, stronger for it. And in the quiet moments, as I stood by the gate, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that we had not just endured, but prevailed. In the silence of the evening, under a sky filled with stars, there was a profound sense of peace. The neighborhood was ours again, a sanctuary of kindness and respect, a place where boundaries were honored and voices heard, a place, at last, to call home.